So Mina is an anthropologist and archivist from Cairo, Egypt. He is the founder of Shubra's archive, which he's here to talk about this today, Egypt's first community-based neighborhood archive. And he's a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Conflict Studies at the University of Marburg in Germany. Mina completed his doctoral thesis in cultural studies at the University of Gießen in Germany, which was later published as a first monograph called Identity, Marginalization, Activism, and Victimhood in Egypt, Misfits of the Coptic Christian Community. He also authored numerous academic and non-academic articles and book chapters on topics related to Shubra, Coptic Christians in Egypt, migration and human rights in the MENA as in Middle East and North Africa region and Europe. Mina previously served as the project coordinator and manager for the MENA Prison Forum, and he teaches courses on anthropological, artistic, ethnographic, and archival methods and practices. Today's lecture is titled Vernacular Archival Practices in Praise of Silence, Inaccessibility, and Incompleteness. It's gonna, as I understood, it's gonna start with a general overview about the Shubra's archive, which is the first participatory archive in Egypt, and then he's going to also touch upon other initiatives that were done internationally, and maybe then connect between what common challenges about participation, authorship, quality over quantity, and so on and so forth in his lecture. And just one last word, Mina is the first of 3 fellows that we're inviting this year at the C2DH under a new initiative that my colleague Natalia, who's attending here today, and I launched, which is focused on Global South researchers working on public history practices. And the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Let me move. I say the floor is yours, and I say, yeah, bye.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot, Miriam. Thanks, Thomas, and thanks, Natalia, and rest of colleagues at the C2DH for giving me the opportunity to present my work today. Also, I would like to thank my colleagues at Shubra's Archives, Yasmin and Iman, in addition to our current interns, Nermeen, Fatma, Rana, Hagar, and Kauthar. I would like to thank them so much because it's our conversations that shape the points I will try to make up today in my presentation. Before starting my official presentation, I just cannot stop thinking about colleagues and friends as well at Documentation and Research in Beirut, in Lebanon. It's where I learned how to do archives and how to become an archivist. This was like actually when I was like 6 or 5 years ago, when I joined them for the Mina Prison Forum project that Miriam mentioned during her introduction about me. I cannot stop thinking about Monica, Ali, Rasha, Abbas, Ayman, Ghalia, and Salam, and other colleagues there who had to leave the office of in the Dahya in Beirut as a result of the ongoing war. Their presence there was a proof that this area in Beirut is a hub of knowledge production and circulation, and not just a war zone and a home of weapons, as we just see in the media. So I really hope that their absence will be short before a return. As Miriam mentioned, I would try today to also make the presentation and the lecture like interesting for you. So I would try to make it as a story that I would love to.
We don't see the slides.
Okay.
So we need to move on.
So it's not shared.
So just a minute. We have a very technical. Yeah.
So the first part that I presented, this is OMAM, right? Documentation research. So for those who are online, it's the place actually based in Dahya, and where the people, the workers there have left actually after the problems started there. Okay. Yeah. So as I said, I would love to make it as a story, like, storyline. I have always loved to be a film writer, so maybe it can be a chance today.
This is your chance, my friend.
Yeah. So during the 2011 revolution, Egypt police forces disappeared from the streets of Cairo. As alternative, the residents of neighborhoods organized what is called in Arabic لجان شعبية, or local popular committees to secure the districts there. I was 19, and I remember a man in his late 40s who owned a small diner telling us, the teenagers at that time, quote, "Anyone who dreamt to be a policeman, here your time has come. Whatever reasons that prevented you from becoming a cop, here is your chance to check people's IDs, driving license, and clothes." And we did. Today, I recall this story for two reasons. First, besides being a script writer, I have always dreamed to do a second PhD in history, actually, or to become a historian, and I think this is also a chance that I have today to present my work in front of dear history colleagues. As a scholar, and second, as a scholar, I would be expected today to present about alternative archives that grapple with state archives in Egypt that are featured, as in many countries in the global south, unfortunately, with being inaccessible and securitized. But like becoming cops during the 2011 revolution, I invite you to think with me today about the blurred lines that exist between being alternative and playing roles of the mainstream. Beyond the alternative police or the alternatives archives, beyond thinking about them as just critical means to replace or to counter state institutions, I invite you to think with me about the similarities and differences of the interactions that result or come with the self-characterization of being alternative while acting like the state. And because I like ethnography, specifically autoethnography, my presentation today consists of quotes that I encountered since 2021, particularly in May, when I found Shubra's archive, Egypt's first archival initiative, which seeks to promote the idea of community archives in Egypt. Vignette A. What kind of archives do you have? During my PhD research, a main focus of mine was the Shubra neighborhood in North Cairo. It is where I lived since my childhood and where the opening story of my presentation happened. I wanted to explore archival material related to the neighborhood as a holistic, comprehensive one, but for sure I didn't find anything in this manner. Instead, I found fragmented collections scattered at the neighborhood parishes, old houses, second-hand markets, abandoned shops, as well as state-sanctioned archives. In addition, I also found other archival material collected by fellow scholars and researchers who also wanted to make sense of these fragmented collections about Shubra neighborhoods. As all doctoral students and academics in general, I became obsessed with marginalized stories, overlooked ones that present an alternative critical history, right? This is what we go to the field. We always want to see what's overlooked, what's marginalized. But I didn't find a better story but the one of the tram workers in Shubra and their class struggle on the 1925 Christmas Eve. So these are the tram workers in 1925 on the Christmas Eve in Shubra who founded the second Coptic Orthodox parish in Shubra. So in 1925, there was just one parish, Coptic Orthodox parish in Shubra, called St. Mary, in a street called Masarra. And on the Christmas Eve of 1925, one of the admins of this church wanted to take a chair from one of the wives of the tram workers and to give it to an elitist lady during the prayer. So of course the workers, they started a crowdfunding initiative to build their own parish, right? And this story is mentioned officially in the book that was published by the parish in the year 2000 while they were celebrating the 75th anniversary of the building of the parish. But usually building parishes in Egypt or in Shubra, it's usually more concerned with other reasons. For example, spiritual reasons like blessings from God or blessings from Mary, or, for example, that Copts want to build parishes in order to equalize the number of the mosques in Cairo. So this kind of stories, they are not usually circulated among the community. So now I would take this story, as all researchers, doctoral students do, would put it in the second chapter of my doctoral dissertation book that Miriam also mentioned its name. I would have an alternative argument about the big exceptional number of the Coptic Orthodox parishes that feature Shubra. Shubra has around 28 Coptic Orthodox parishes, very exceptional number compared to other neighborhoods, districts, not only in Egypt, but also in most of the Arab countries, if not all of them. I would mention my argument that Coptic Christians do not just build parishes because they present a big number of the population in Shubra, or they just to seek equality with Muslims, but it is also because they have different ideas about how a space of worship should be. And it's a question, isn't not this what we learn in academia, that members of any group are diverse and heterogeneous? So this is actually the point of my dissertation, that we should also present to Western audience that members of our communities are diverse and they are not the same, there are class differences between them.
What a surprise.
So this is auto-ethnography, right? It teaches us how to always be self-critical. Okay, now I have the alternative story. It is also mentioned, as I said, in an official book published by the church, but it's only on one page and it's usually marginalized and not circulated. Like next year, they would celebrate the 100th anniversary. And my sister's father-in-law, he is one of the committee members of the celebration of the 100-year anniversary. And when I wanted him to further feature this story in the celebration, he told me, like, you know, it might bring up problems, so let's not just do it. And this is what I call the Margaret Mead effect. I don't know if you are aware of Margaret Mead, right? Margaret Mead, anthropologist, classic anthropologist from the 1920s. It's considered nowadays to be a feminist, although at that time there wasn't like feminist discourses. She went to the Samoa Islands to discover actually she wrote about sexual lives of girls coming in age in the Samoa, and she wrote the book called Coming in Age in the Samoa, right? Many years later, like a few decades later, another anthropologist came and he carried out interviews, and it was made into a film about what Margaret Mead wrote. And of course, Margaret Mead wrote about how these girls are trying to resist kind of how they are being not repressed, but the traditional, you know, ideas about them as girls. And this anthropologist wrote that actually the girls were lying to her. They just faked what they told to her, and that's why Margaret Mead didn't say the truth. Of course, this is also problematic of the other anthropologists, because when he did the interviews with these ladies, they are now grandmothers, right? They are now old ladies who might not want to give out, you know, what they said when they were young. Other also critical scholars of Margaret Mead said that Margaret Mead wanted to write about herself because she is also very young, in her early 20s, coming from the United States, also conservative society, like at that time, and she wanted actually to write about herself, and that's why she just, if you want, projected what is about herself on her interlocutors in the Samoa Islands. But regardless of whether the people were lying or not to her, this is what I call the Margaret Mead's effect, like, which is also the problem of many aspects of knowledge produced about the global South in Western institutions. The people come, they build certain stories, they look for overlooked, alternative, marginalized stories, and then they present them in Western institutions, as I'm doing it now, today. And then we forget about what these presentations or representations would affect the community back, right, home. And I think also during the conference that was held here in Luxembourg about public history, we had this panel with colleagues from the Global South. We reflected on this point, like how this gap that's usually between knowledge production and knowledge circulation, like we usually produce knowledge about a certain community somewhere else, so the circulation is not the same, is not happening in the same space. So this is the story of Margaret Mead, or that really beyond being lies or not, that's I'm trying to learn from. So for me, it's not what the problem is, not just to produce groundbreaking, overlooked stories in our scholarship, but it's more about how and why these alternative stories are currently negotiated within the community, how they are in a denial of them, how the details are changed and adopted, and how the people are trying to change their opinions about the same stories throughout history, right? And this is what I would love to argue, that it's also make up part of the core. These are core parts of the community archives that I seek to achieve in Shubra, also with my colleagues there. So my answer to the people who ask me this question, what kinds of archives do you have in Shubra? Because they expected that we already have paper archives, right? So they asked me what kinds of photo. We didn't start Shubra's archive by accumulating documents. But my answer was, in Shubra, we are not interested in accumulating papers, although this might be one of our strategies, maybe long-term strategies. But in Shubra, we care more about grappling with the historical absence of an archival category called Shubra, despite of the numerous accounts and collections scattered about the neighborhood. So asking why there is no something called Shubra's archive, and why a story like the tram workers is not mentioned as a Shubra, part of Shubra's whole story, right? And why it's just mentioned, marginalized in one page in this book. As I will emphasize later, we construct the category of Shubra's archive to see its contribution to, as well as how it will be affected by the residents' lives. Like, what does it mean to add Shubra's archive, the term Shubra's archive, to make an archive for a neighborhood? How does it contribute to the history of the neighborhood? And as well as how the history of the neighborhood shall interact with this category of Shubra's archive. So the rest of my presentation, actually, we are going to play with this category called Shubra's archive. Vignette B, there is no archive but the state archive. So the construction of the category of Shubra's archive is not as easy as it might seem. The first thing that you would encounter, of course, is the state logic, right? When I started to register for the place legally, I wanted to have official papers. The person at the state bureaucracy refused the name, and he told me there is no archive but the state archive. You cannot just and found any place and call it Shubra's archive, or Cairo's archive. So I spent a couple of years to come up with a different name and to struggle to make the name of Shubra's archive, but I ended up Shubra's archive is just a name for, like today that I'm just using it in the logo, but the official name is Sard Center for History and Social Research. Sard in Arabic means to narrate, right? But let's go with Shubra's archive, right? But that's the thing. So I
They don't tell anyone.
So, but this is having the name of Shubra's archive as well. I would call it, it's an alternative archival initiative. But here also, again, I want to say that the alternative might not be the most accurate description of Shubra's archive. Remember the cops playing the role of the cops right back in 2011 revolution. We were not cops, but at the same time we imagined a space that claimed similar practices. So by mentioning that we are Shubra's archive, whether or not we accept it, we again have the same, we share something with the logic of the state, right? We have something about what is called archival practices. For archival practice as well, the community archives do not have to be an alternative to the state. Sometimes it's intersect and overlap. And one good way to discover this is actually a pedagogical exercise that we practiced as part of Shubra's archive learning workshops. In July this year, I co-facilitated a workshop with my colleague in Shubra's archive, Yasmin Ismail, who is also in the Yasmin Tar Ismail, was joining us online today, and who is responsible for the learning archival programs at Shubra's archive. We, together with people, with colleagues at also another initiative called Megawra that are seeking to build archives about architecture in Cairo, we created an exercise called Absence Archive. So it's about mainly the red light district in Shubra. Shubra used to have a red light district until 1949, before sex work was illegalized in Egypt. And we divided them into 3 groups. A group would take the state role, as we did like with the cops in 2011. Another group would take the community role, the neighbor, the residents, and a third group would take the scholars role, right? Of course, at some point, for example, I'm a resident in the neighborhood and the scholar, so it's of course, but like let's just keep them 3 groups. And we started to tell them, imagine if there is something that we want to build called red light district archive in Shubra, what would be the logic of the three? Like what the community would say, and what the state would say, and what the scholars would say. Of course, you can imagine the community would say, yeah, we used to have this, but now we are more moral society. The state would say, would share the moral also argument, but at the same time, it would also link it to a state project of, the abolition of sex work is sometimes also connected to modernization of the state and changing of urban policies. The scholars, of course, will try to make link of the two aspects and also add some theories from Judith Butler or something. So we tried to play this game with them, but it was actually very useful, and it was a way to explore the different logics of why a state would seek to keep an archive of this red light district, the same for the scholarly and the community circles. Vignette C. So there is an apartment that will be opened. Once in this year, in a winter night, I received a phone call at midnight from one of the sellers who is selling paper archives and from whom I buy paper collections, right, about Shubra. Usually, like, he called me in the midnight, told me that there is a building that will be demolished, and the new owner of the building want to get rid of the papers inside the apartments. But it's not for free, of course. Urban changes, demolition of buildings to build bigger ones is not new in Shubra or in other districts, but there is a new trend of the commodification of the archives, right? That scholars, researchers like myself contributed to during the last decade or so, thanks to scholars. So the sellers now who are selling at second-hand paper markets now know the value. Previously, such paper would be sold with a very little amount of money or even without any, but now it has been much more commodified and monetized. And this is really one important aspect that we work on in Shubra's archive, that the value of a certain document or a paper is decided by a number of factors, including the classic supply-demand rule, as well as the age of the paper. For example, if it's something from the monarchical era before 1952, it would be more expensive than the more contemporary one. It would be called the Arabic Malaki. So we said, like, this paper is Malaki, right? Malaki means it's from the king time, so it's more expensive. But there are also other reasons, like the seller's evaluation, personal evaluation, and he would never share the reason. For example, once one seller told me, quote, "I cannot tell you why this costs that much. My father advised me not to share my business secrets." Another one added, quote, do not fool me by complaining about the price. I know that you would sell them abroad in euros and dollars." And I will get to this later, right? Because this is also a very sensitive thing. But while I would not sell anything, and I start to convince them that no, I buy things to keep it in Shubra, and this is also one golden rule in Shubra's archive with my colleagues, that whatever we buy, what happens in Shubra should remain in Shubra literally through the paper archives. Even we don't move them to another city in Egypt or to another neighborhood. We want to bring them, to make them in Shubra. And this is for also reason that I will mention later. So, but while I would not sell anything, and thinking about the business secrets that sometimes also include the source of the paper archives that the seller has, I have been thinking about the archival practices in the past that kept some documents in our hand until today, on the account of others that we lost, right? And how these documents that we currently have is valued as a result of other contemporary archival practices. So how people in the past, why would we have these documents now? Why they kept these documents, that we are having them now, and how these documents that we are having now, how they are becoming commodified and monetized. In fact, this is what I call the chain of archival value making. And this is a key kind of concept also in Shubra's archive. That is another cornerstone of Shubra's archive and community archive. In other words, one important way to define community archives is to define what the community means. These are the sellers and their business secrets, of course, the origins of the paper archives that I do not usually know, origin, right? So sometimes you just find something and then you cannot really trace from where it originally come. The real estate investors who currently get rid of the paper archives, but of course now with a monetary value unlike the past, as well as histories and lives of people who decided at a certain time of history to value and keep their documents, but who later decided at another moment of history to leave them to be valued by other current actors like myself. This is, for example, a birth certificate. As you can see, it's written in Arabic and English and French. And it's one of a collection by a guy called Zaza Mazika. That's his name on Instagram. He refused to, actually Yasmin met him, he refused to give us the original paper, but he kindly accepted us to scan it. And for him, he doesn't sell anything. He sells a lot of things, but when it comes to Shubra, he say, no, I don't sell anything related to Shubra, just keep them. So this is also something, but again, we are not interested in accumulating papers, but seeing these archival practices and how they are linked to different archival values, right? Like, because he's from Shubra, he has also a space in Shubra where he sells his antiques. But when it comes to Shubra, he never sells anything that has the name Shubra on it. So this is something also interesting. Okay, D, because you are limiting me to Shubra, the category of Shubra's archive would not only be criticized by fellow academics who would always ask me why Shubra, why limiting a community archives to a neighborhood. The quote I just mentioned was also told to me by one of the sellers, one of the vendors, right? Well, I'm born and lived in Shubra. This might be a reason why I'm interested in having something called Shubra's archive. But more seriously, and but also related to this, I will give another answer. Shubra's archive is the production of my archival practices that come into existence because of my interactions with and amongst past and present Shubra's residents, as well as with the sellers. So together, when I say to the person, I want things about Shubra, right? In this moment, I construct the category of Shubra as a neighborhood. There is a production of the neighborhood as a space, right? That I tell the guy. And I will share with you two interesting stories, for example, like also how these archival categories are being constructed through archival practices. For example, the same seller once told me that there is someone who is just interested in collecting pictures of people who wear glasses. And there is another one who is interested in collecting pictures that include both humans and animals. I responded with a speculative question, as I usually do with my interlocutors. So I'm quoting myself, what if these pictures also belong to Shubra, like being photographed in Shubra? Whom would you call? Like call to give him the pictures? Like if there's a picture with a person with a glass who is used to live in Shubra. So he told me, because I will give it to you because you are Habibi. And
You may have to translate that for us.
Habibi, like, my lover, but of course lover
in a friendly way.
not an intimate way, right?
You're my BFF.
It's just said, yeah, exactly. He answered, like, he might be right. Relations between sellers and buyers, like myself, might affect the making of archival categories and collections as well, right? So it's this internal, minute, micro relationships that really can give essence to archival categories. And this is exactly what I'm interested in, like how community relationships contribute to archival categories and contribute to archival practice. But it's also how the category of Shubra, his answer and our conversations, let me think about how the category of Shubra is contingent in relation to hundreds and thousands of other categories. These might be temporal, once placing Shubra with other places as components of a certain time. Remember, like things related to the monarchical era are more expensive, right? Or these categories might be geographically oriented as well, linking Shubra to Cairo, to the Egyptian nation, or to the world, if we think of migration movements to and from Shubra during the last century. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to, but this is like also about the economies, geographies, and temporalities of the ownership. Indeed, these geographies and temporalities are again bundled in a monetized and commodified system that is not isolated from the negatively remarkable urban changes happening in Cairo, in Egypt now. But they are also interrelated to broader authoritarian policies, right, of securitized, sanctioned archives. There are no archives but the state archives, which altogether produce and shape what is called the alternative vernacular archival practices. So, for example, I would sharing with you. This is from. This is the last, one of the last, an old tram car that is kept in a very abandoned space, and thankfully, our former colleague Mariam Yasser took a picture of it in a very kind of sneaky way. But it's kept without, like, it's not a museum, right? It's just thrown there. And tram lines in Egypt, in Cairo in particular, it was built by a Belgian company. So also linking how migration and also like linking Shubra to the world. Or this building is a picture taken by Amira Noshaati, and she is a journalist in Ahram Online. She wrote a very interesting piece about us. You can also search it online. And this is very Italian architecture. Like there's a lot of Italian architecture in Shubra, Greek as well. There were Armenian community, there was Jewish community. I mean, so how we can even link Shubra to the world. And this is Dalida. I don't know if you know her. Like she was born in Shubra, right? She's Italian, born in Shubra. She got Miss Egypt in 1954 while she was living in Shubra. And this picture is a snapshot from a film called Dalida pour toujours that was made end of 1970s when she came to Egypt. And this is the balcony. It still exists until now. But I will show you another, like, a sad picture at the end about the balcony. But when I shared it on Twitter, someone just, it's a Photoshop. Then I shared the video. And the film is really also great. You can find it on YouTube, I guess. Okay, vignette A and E, and I'm about to finish. There is someone in Paris who pays in euros to have things about Shubra. This guy is paying in. That's also stories that are around. Prices are getting higher of collecting paper archives. And this guy, like, talking about the international similar initiative. So someone is interested in Shubra, but in Paris, want to make an exhibition about Shubra in Paris. Which is, you can see my face now, but I appreciate the work, but still, of course, it's I don't know him. I'm really starting to search, but of course, one of the business secrets, so I cannot really reach him until now. The exportation of archives to Europe and the United States have regulations, right, to the Western world, of course. Things older than, that's the official one, or also the communally negotiated one. Things older than 100 or 150 years should not be checked in your luggage, according to an advice of one of the sellers. He told me this. Otherwise, it's considered athar or monuments. And smuggling monuments has been illegal since the early 1970s. The sellers would also abandon posting certain paper archives online or to offer them for selling publicly if they believe they hold sensitive issues about the state. Others think that at some point the state would control the paper archives market or would impose taxes. This is why they would like to make as much profits as they could before the state take over this whole business thing. In fact, I believe that having a community archive is necessary to think about all of these concrete interactions with the state in the here and now. This is not only on the level of the sellers, of course, and their fears, but also how people's private collections at their homes that are not for sale or that are not circulated in paper archives market deserve having a collective hub in which residents would together claim parts of the neighborhoods, cities or countries' histories. That is, by building conversations around archival materials that narrate the story of a street they live in, or, for example, a shop that used to exist next to their school. So exporting archives might save them. Okay, so was the argument of the Orientalists who stole monuments to European and American museums before the legalization of 1970s, of course. But they might save them, and people might have a point about that. But I'm thinking also about the situated knowledge that would be lost, right? I'm also thinking about how the exported archives, the saved ones, if they would be exported, would completely solve the accessibility problem that official archives in Egypt has. Okay, so many historians, sadly, they claim that they want to make archives more accessible, but by taking them outside Egypt, I don't know if they would be that accessible, especially if we think if Shubra's residents would be able to get a visa or pay for a ticket to go and see the Aspired exhibition in Paris. So on a positive note, this is Stephanie Amin, our also colleague in Shubra's archive. She did a film called Cinema Masarra, or I Found My Love in Masarra. I know which is similar to, she's inspired by the song of Darida, I Found My Love in Portofino. And it's about a cinema called Masarra that used to exist, and now it's a building. Her family has a relation to this cinema. So she did a lot of screenings in Paris, in France as well, because she did her master's in France. But when she screened the film in Shubra a couple of weeks ago, I was there. She said that this screening is very special to her, but because this is like, the situated knowledge that we want, because the screening would allow other people who came and joined the screening to share their experiences with cinemas, with entertainment, leisurely practices in Shubra that would be missed if this screening would happen just in Paris or in Europe, right? So having this screening, building these negotiations, either visually or even by talking like myself around archives, paper archives, inside the neighborhood is very important for these community archival practices to flourish and to be reproduced. Okay, the last two vignettes, which are with some concluding remarks. As noted, the construction of the category of Shubra's archive puts it in relation to other categories, whether this relation is tensional, contemporary, supplementary, or whether category A, for example, is subset or superset of category B, right? The two quotes here holds the possibility of building the category of the Gulf archive, right? So there are people who come from the Gulf to take magazines published in Egypt before the foundation of many Gulf countries. So many Gulf countries want to have a history about themselves, so through the magazines published in Egypt. It does not only hold the construction of the Gulf as them, like related to them, but also raises questions about representation and ownership. For instance, an article written about the Hijaz, for example, before the foundation of Saudi Arabia in the Egyptian periodical called the Musawwir. Ask yourself, to whom it belongs? Could we call it Gulf heritage? And to what extent do the presence of financial resources in the Gulf help in the construction of a certain heritage on the account of others, and specific meaning of paper archives belonging? The us and them is also evident in the second quote, which is the speaker negatively linked to the high monetary value of the paper archives, right? So when they know, for example, that I'm Coptic Christian, so all Copts want to have their own heritage, so they just double the price on you. However, because I'm anthropologist, so you have always to have the contradictory aspects of things. So I would also like to reflect on another point, especially when it comes to buying from a Muslim seller, right? A Coptic-oriented collection. During my PhD research, I've been searching for spaces, times, and opportunities during which Muslims and Copts would know about each other's beliefs and rituals. And recently, and I'm very happy about that, recently I've been thinking about this, I've discovered how the archival practices and their embedded relations can present moments of coming together and knowing about each other. So really, when I'm buying things from a seller, he would tell me, this is something connected to you, and then I would tell him, yeah, was published, this book, Copts use it to pray, but now it changed, or the text changed, and these kind of things. Lastly, what I wrote here. Okay. Lastly, this is what I heard from like one of the vendors when I tried to convince him not to sell things to people who would export archives abroad. He told me, I don't want to make money anymore, I care about heritage. And he actually joined our screening of Stephanie Amin's film. To be honest, I have my own biases in keeping the archives in Shubra for the sake of the production of situated knowledge. As I mentioned, we agreed with this seller in particular, we agreed to work together on a digital platform in which we can combine his economic interests and our scholarly work in Shubra. Indeed, we are currently in the process of building up the community, which would be defined by the number of the explored archival practices. But again, we should also know that there are economic difficulties, right, happening in the country. And if the seller would tell me, no, I should buy it because I need money, I cannot just stop them. And this is really the dilemma, that like to archival practice and community archives really include the here and now, not only of the economic difficulties, but also the urban changes and the state authoritarian policies. So I said what I want to say as a last statement, but let me read it again. So inspired by my friends in South Africa and other parts of the global South, I believe that community archives mostly make sense in times of conflict, urban changes, repressive policies, and economic difficulties that might not only lead to the loss of archives or to their exportation to the Gulf or to the West, but can also change the nature of the archival practices, that is, of what people keep, get rid of, or sell in paper markets. Thank you so much. Before you clap your hands, this is the balcony of Dalida, and this guy like really built this shop, a green color, and you can see like behind the car there is a small piece. This is this part. No. This is a piece, like it's written on it, a plate written on it, here live the leader, but just when they open the door of his shop, of course it disappeared. So this is how we try to convince or to work with community archives. Thanks a lot. I don't know if should stop. Oh, let's keep it like this.
Keep it like this. You don't want to look at yourself.
Yeah, it's fine.
Is this it? Okay. Then maybe we'll look at the questions on
Maybe I can also
your side. Okay. Do we have questions in the audience here with us? Sure.
Thank you so much. That was so fascinating. I've got there's things I could ask, but I guess one thing that really struck me was it was so interesting hearing about the sort of market that you're engaging with, and that there are sellers to begin with who've like commodified these things, and then there's these individuals, like you mentioned, this antiquarian who is keeping all the Shubra things, won't sell those, the birth certificate, and that kind of made me wonder, like for you as a in your work and with all of your background too, in archival practice, like where is the line between personal collector, like a collector, and an archivist? Is it really just sort of very black and white, that one is about public access and one is about kind of this private access, or is there more to that? I'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Thanks. I think also Yasmin also might be happy to because she has been also interested in differentiating between personal and private, right? Mm-hmm. And this is really something. For example, if my father used to be a state person, right, or an MP person, and he kept archives. These are personal or private or state archives, and this is something interesting to play with, right? And this is also a practice that we did with the people, right? If someone has the birth certificate like that I showed now, does it belong just to the person? And I really also was together with Yasmin as well, we have been sometimes critical of the term orphan archives, like sometimes just for me it's a way just to leave it, just it's orphan archives, so you can do it with no, but for me orphan archives, because they had a space, from their origin, for me, if you really kept, that's also another argument, if you kept the archives to where they belong, it's not a matter of being patriotic or anything, but you would be able more to explore them, you would be able to be critical of this concept of orphan archive. So for me, of course, there is, like for example, we have documents, we have a collection of an Armenian lady in Shubra. Some documents inside might not, her family members, if they saw them, they might not be happy to have them public, right? For me, I would just call it orphan archive. Really, if I I'm just based in Western country, right? And just do whatever I want with them. Of course, with keeping in mind the ethical considerations, but keeping them in Shubra, no, it makes us more aware of this. And that's in the abstract of my talk as well. Really, having a place inside the neighborhood, and the place actually is my old family's house, so it's a very small flat. It's even like in the space of the room we are staying in now. But having any space is just a claim that we want to raise more ethical problems, raise more ethical issues, have more conversations about the what do the people think about what we are doing, So these kind of things for me, really, we don't have clear answers of whether this is private or personal or state or even connected to the Shubra archive, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's actually a way to always have these conversations, ongoing conversations about the papers, and to connect field work to paper archives in a very dynamic way and continuous way as well.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mina. I have several questions, but I think the first one, let me go back to my notes, is connected to what you said about not being able to name it archive because it's controlled by some people, and the fact of archiving as a form of resistance, as we were talking about before. Can you tell us more about how the fact of archiving had an impact on the community? I mean, how did people react? Did that help to create new things? So the things of archiving as a process, how did people react? How did people in the community, did they use it? Did they make them theirs? Can you talk a bit about the use?
Okay, I will tell you about a carpenter, like in our street. So it started with him in 2021, because my uncle, my mother's brother, he's a doctor who has a clinic just next to us, next to the building where Shubra is associated. So he knows, like, I'm Dr. Mina, right? So he thought at the beginning that I'm continuing the career of my uncle. So when someone found my uncle's clinic is closed to me, like, Dr. Mina, but Dr. Mina is here. So he came up and I was giving, like, there was a workshop, and then Dr. Mina, like, I told him, but, I think, this joke of, like, I'm dying, we are all going to die, this kind of philosophy. The same guy, I was so happy that a few weeks ago, he was, anyone who comes, he knows that he would get lost, because really the flat is placed, if you come to this street where Shubra's archive is located, and you are not from the street, so you are coming to Shubra's archive. Like, there is no other way. Either you are living in this square, or you are coming to Shubra. If you are not from the neighbor place, you are coming to Shubra's archive. So if anyone is lost, and there is no big sign because also of security reasons, so they would be guided to Shubra's archive. So the same carpenter now would tell me, I told him, his name is Mahmoud. I told him, Mahmoud, thanks for your efforts. He told me, I know it better than Muhammad, who is, like, in front of him, who is the mechanic. Muhammad doesn't know anything about archives. I'm the one who knows about archives. So, I mean, it's a very slow process, right? And I can say it's a very slow process and this is connected, for example, to other neighborhoods in Cairo, like, for example, the Garden City, where Sidaj is placed, or where next to it also there is the IFAU and the French Institute. People are, know that there is a place called, or the American University, even Tahrir, these were places, even if they are inaccessible, of course, all of these, most of them, Sidaj maybe is doing better in this, but the people know that there is kind of people who are doing something inside called knowledge production or education or workshops. Shubra, although it has been covered in many, books, academic, non-academic books, novels, movies, songs, there is nothing about it. There is no place inside it that can really make anything about it. For example, also Francesca Biancani, a historian who wrote about sex work in colonial Egypt, right? And she was just on a phone call with her last week, and she told me she wrote about sex work mainly in downtown, which is 3-4 kilometers away from Shubra, because there are things about, there are archives kept, maybe, I don't know how, but for the sex work or the brothers red light district inside Shubra, she didn't find anything. Also, another scholar who's working on Greeks in Alexandria, she didn't find anything about Greeks who used to live in Alexandria. We just know about Italians living in Shubra because of the Lida, but there are a lot of people who used to be there. There is also a big Jewish community also that used to live in one street in Shubra. So, but we don't know anything about this. And this is also one question that I started with Shubra, why we don't have this category. So, constructing the category, to mind if I'm answering your question, was a way to engage with the absence of information really about the neighborhood, right? But at the same time, it was questioning why we don't have anything that can combine everything written about the neighborhood. Like, for example, Asif Bayat, he came to Shubra, he wrote about Shubra in his book, Life as Politics, he stayed in Shubra. But even when I met Asif, and he's a mentor, of course, of mine, I told him, you know what, I would have loved if you have a book talk about your book inside Shubra. And that's also what we started to do, to have book talks. If a researcher did research about Shubra or anything, would have a book talk. There's no space inside Shubra that would allow for this. There's no space inside Shubra that would allow for a screening of a movie like Stephanie's, although it's a very short movie. So the absence of this engagement with, and usually people who talk about Shubra from abroad, like what I'm doing now, for example, but also what even people, Egyptians, who became famous actors, they would, on TV shows, say, Shubra, and being kind of this nostalgia, like naive, real nostalgia, that's kind of detached from what's happening in the neighborhood now. So I said, okay, let's have this space. Just people would come and speak about what Shubra is. Collect some documents, not accumulating, but just collecting and have some conversations around them. But I would say that it's a very slow process because, of course, I'm not blaming on the people, right, of not knowing anything about archives, but because they do archiving. I mean, every shop, every house, they do their own private or personal, these kind of categories. But to have a space, to have a conversation about it, it has never existed. Not only Shubra, but also other neighboring districts like Imbaba, Zawiya Hamra, Sabtiya, all of these neighborhoods do not have any space where people can talk about their pasts or even their presents.
No, I think we should move to the online questions because we know we'll be here for a bit longer, so then I will have the opportunity to ask.
You have 3 questions online.
Okay.
The first one is about basically the outreach, the education, how you publicize the archives. So first, a fantastic talk. Sorry, I missed the start. So I wanted to know more about publicizing the archives. What about the education, the outreach that you kind of mentioned? Can you say a bit more about this?
Okay. So, but there is the publicizing. Is it sorted, digitized? That's the.
Yeah, that's the
Okay, that's the second. Okay, because it appears. Okay. Yeah. So the education first.
As you prefer. I mean, this is the same person asking.
The same person. Okay, I didn't see it. Okay, thanks for the questions. Okay, so we digitized some. We currently applying for grants to digitize others. We are having a website that is under construction since 2023. Because of course there are a lot of lack of resources, of course, and I smuggle asset-free folders, and this kind of things to keep the archives. But I would really love to digitize. Our dream is to buy a very professional scanner to digitize everything. The problem, of course, with grants, most of the grants that they give you the money to digitize at other places, but really we want to keep the scanner also in Shubra, to have the scanner, to hire people to work on that. So this is also the digitization process as well. Again, depends on the resources, I would say, but we are trying to do. The outreach and the education, that's something very, very important for us. So the book that the Tram book, which I'm very happy that can I mention it again?
Please.
That is the first Arabic book in the library of CTDH. It's actually a combination of what we call a learning research program. A learning research program is that we start by giving courses on oral history, ethnography, family archives, and then the participants, they start to work on a certain projects. We also give some small workshops Yasmin, for example, next Friday, I think she's going to give a workshop with some friends who arrived from Sudan after the war, to also reach out to how they can also build up a community archive related to the Sudanese current community living in Cairo and Egypt.
Do you have the agenda that you should?
Yes, yeah, and the agenda, for example, this is, yeah, so this is also, agenda is, I don't know if it will appear on the, okay. So the agenda actually also this, that Mariam will show, it also was a way to kind of engage with our also participants, in order to, for example, we have the projects, and each project we build questions for the people to answer. It's fully in Arabic, and then the people, for example, when was the first time you went to the cinema? What was your, if it was a special day, do you keep any cinema tickets, if it's about cinemas? And then later the idea really is to build, again, a collaborative project with them, meaning an exhibition or a collective book or even a comics story, as we did with the Tram project as well, that we are also combining paper archives with oral history interviews.
So the idea is for people to keep this notebook, and then for every section that Mina and his colleagues had, is to have information from their own lives or history, or even their neighbors. If they remember anything, they write it down, and then they scan the QR code and they contribute with what they have. If they have pictures, train tickets, whatever. It's sort of a personal collage, but that could also be shared collectively after. I thought it's a really nice idea of trying to get people involved in participation, but also doing like private archiving, which is also shared.
So make the private,
Yeah, it's really
so that's sorry, I should have mentioned this example, but this is exactly a way, right, to make it the private, because people really, many of the times they get really excited when they know that they have similar interests, right? So there is one of the projects I shared also in the brochure is about football. So for example, it's called I Was at the Stadium. So yeah, since you love football as well, so I wanted to say to you, put it here. So actually it's about memories with football matches, and for example, having a football match, it's not about the football match itself, but it's about the transportation that you took to go there, the food that you ate, the day of spending it, the game itself, and how it is can tell you a story of of your neighborhood, of your city, and of your country. For example, if a game, I usually follow on YouTube videos a game that, for example, someone posted an old game and someone would write a comment, yeah, this game was 2 days after my father's death, and I felt guilty that I love football, so I had to watch it, but I didn't want to, I was mourning at the same time, but I was happy that my team won, right? So, or this game happened on the same day when I arrived to the Gulf, after my migration to the Gulf, and I remember watching it on a coffee house with other Egyptians. So this kind of linking football games to broader personal histories that also can have, wider also histories is also something that we do also with cinemas, other leisurely practices. We did it with the Tram project as well, when was the first time, always the first time is always, a good entry to link to link your personal story to a wider project as well. Thanks for that great question.
I don't know the name. I don't know your name, so I didn't say your name when you ask a question. Sorry, because I don't see it. The second question is from Laura from Ireland, Northern Ireland. So she said, thanks, and I'm reading the question for you. Thanks, Mina, that was fascinating, and great to hear that the C2DH is also focusing on Global South project. Can you talk a little bit more about the preservation of this archive, how it's been preserved, and what are the challenges?
Okay, yeah, we are really preserving it. Like, again, I should mention her several times, Yasmin as well. Since she is now the one who's taking care of the archives. So, I mean, what we are doing now are very basic, ways of preservation. So these asset-free folders, files, because the archives actually are kept in my family house wardrobe, so where we used to keep the clothes. So it's wood, and wood are not good for papers. So we needed to keep them also to have, isolating layers. Some of them again are digitized. Really, that we inshallah, if we can get a grant to have really proper shelves to do kind of the preservation in a more kind of secured way. But really the biggest challenge, Laura, is that we always insisting on keeping them in Shubra. And this is something, just a statement that we want to do, you know, and keeping them in Shubra for us, you know, for example, after we published the tram project, I got emails from friends in Belgium who wanted to buy the tram archives that we have. And it was with a big amount of money, and I refused. And like, you know, because okay, I will get the money, I can buy other stuff, you know, but then the papers will be kept in Belgium. And for me, okay, they are also belong to the Belgian history, and that's also making it global. But the Belgians, they already have enough papers, archives, you know, we don't have anything. And that's also, you know, a matter of equality as well. So I said, no, these papers should be kept, you know. Of course, very challenging because they are very fragmented also maps that we need urgently to work on, to scan, to preserve. So the challenges really is, if you want, they are, we went to the challenges ourselves. We chose the more difficult option to keep the things in Shubra, which is something that make all the challenges that you can imagine, including, of course, security, state, you know, no state, no archives, but state archives.
The first question from Adila. Thank you, Adila, for your question. The next one is from Taras. Thank you, Mina, for a great introduction into your archival practice and research project. It was very informative and educating. And it also resonates with current archival practices in Ukraine, where I come from, in many ways. From sellers monetizing the value of a document to redefining archiving categories for the existing mainstream archives. If you could elaborate more on using the term vernacular in regard to your archiving practice. It was mentioned in your title. Where does it originate from? I was wondering if there is any online marketplace or auction for collectioners and sellers in Egypt where such transfer of documents. There is an entire phenomenon of such things on eBay. It also happens in Ukraine. So digital dimension of this phenomenon, is there anything like that in Egypt? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the eBay thing, I'm laughing because like it's also something that it's being newly discovered by many of the sellers of the second-hand market. And it was discovered when one of them bought another thing from another one, and then later that this person saw it, I don't know, 1,000 times more expensive being sold on being posted on eBay, which is really, for him was a shock. And then he started to do his own eBay, you know, account. By vernacular, I mean this actually. I'm before being or trying to learn how to become an archivist, like it's also a process that I'm getting into it. To be honest, I'm anthropologist, right? And I'm doing ethnography. I'm always interested, as I mentioned here in my presentation, these small quotes from the people and linking really their lives, their everyday lives, to what is called archival practice. So not only what we kept or what, for example, so I started Shubra's archive with the books, paperwork, you know, bills that my family kept. And then I see what do other people keep and why do they keep them? What things they throw away and what things they keep at their homes. And really there is a whole kind of industry around it. There's a whole of, you know, I don't like the word scene a lot, but there is a whole scene around it. For example, there is people who would once in Shubra and other neighborhoods, people would put this, you know, posters on walls randomly. We buy everything in Nashtari Kulla Shay. It's but at some point it was removed because I think it was at some point there was a problem with the police, and they put their phone number. They buy anything that you can want to just make it out. We buy everything, and no one knew who is behind this. You know, I tried to call them once, but really you can never know. Is it an organization? Is it like, you know, in CIA? You never know. But also, so the vernacular for me is really how people's everyday life, including, as I said, the economic difficulties they face, really push them to sell their own antiques. You know, once also a guy who had a big private collection. He declared on Facebook that he's out of money. He really wants money. He's very old. He's very sick. He wants to sell his library. He wants to sell all of his documents. He put a very big number, like over $100,000. I didn't see that. Of course, I called him. I didn't see what he has, but he put a very big number. When the dollar at that time it was 30 Egyptian pounds. You are talking about 3 million Egyptian pounds. What I'm more interested in is what, you know, these personal lives that contribute to this selling process, and how these things that if they would be sold to whom, you know, this, as I mentioned, chain of value making that I mentioned. So this is the vernacular for me, in Arabic called mahalli, right? Mahalli means local, but I really also happening that the local, for example, if someone as this guy living in Paris, he's from Shubra originally, and he wants to make an exhibition about the neighborhood he used to live in because he is becoming so rich. You know, so his life, his capacity, financial capacity, pushed him to call someone in this second-hand market, collect anything about Shubra. And he's a competitor with us, of course. You know, and so this kind of interactions, you know, like when people construct a category about Shubra, what does it happen, you know, and how this category also, its monetary value going up, down, depending on the, again, supply, demand, and all the other factors that I mentioned.
Maybe one more question, then we move to Natalia. The question from Neil. Neil, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your first name. Does Mina know about the Egyptian Center for Culture and Arts, Makan, in Cairo, that record and promote traditional music in Egypt, increasingly endangered? Does he similarly identify immaterial endangered knowledge in Shubra, music, voices, languages, dialect, and create new archives recording to protect it?
Yeah, I know Makan, of course, and like we are more, yeah, thanks Neil for the question. We are more interested again in the, no, I would not say material or immaterial, right? But of course we start with paper archives. Like we start our work with like the birth certificate that I showed, okay, with the interns that we had since July until the end of this month, for example, they would identify, okay, what are the names written on this birth certificate, what are the addresses, if the address still exists or not, if the hospital where the baby was born exists or not, who was responsible for this, if the hospital is connected to a missionary, you know, French or Italian missionary, for example. So should we more focus or research what kinds of missionaries, because there are a lot of missionary spaces in Shubra, and this is something that makes Shubra also a global, I would say, global neighborhood. So we start with a paper archive in specific. So I would say, yeah, more than the immaterial or the music or the voices. Thanks. Yeah, and thanks, Laura. Let's get in touch, and I would love, of course, to.
Yeah, for everyone who joined us online, and if Mina agrees, we could circulate Mina's contact and maybe the more information about Shubra's archives for those of you who want to know more, and then you could like keep the conversation from there. Do we have a last question in the audience? No? Then I have like a couple of ones. I'll keep some for later for when we have some sort of a conversation. But then I think there's this, which might be also useful for us to close with, for you to reflect on. There's this idea with the fact that archival centers, or the fact of archiving, is something that is not very common to our region, that is more considered of an elite practice, and that if you want to include it in the communal or in the popular areas where no cultural centers are already pre-existing, it gives, like, it makes people disconnect from it, thinking, oh, so this is for archives, it means for people who know. or oh, this is archives, it means for people who have money, or I don't know, or maybe also linking back to the fact that you said like there's this person who wanted to do an exhibition of archives on Shubra in Paris. This also raises another question of whether or not you want to work with these archives on an artistic exhibition, museum level or not, and how do you reflect on it based on your critical thinking on all of these practices from a perspective of maybe the global south has another way of dealing with these materials than what we've been told or what we've been learning about these from before.
Yeah, of course, that's the thing, right? So I mean, our archives are sadly they are like in I cannot speak English. Yeah, they are elitists, and as you said, they are elitists not only because elites care about collecting their own private, but there is this idea of the guardians, and also there is one of the grants that I want to apply with some colleagues in Cambridge called Guardians of Archives. I didn't like the name of it.
Starting with the name, no.
No, like really, because that's the thing, right? I mean, guardians of what? I mean, that's the thing, and also this idea of personal, private, also making up this knowledge around them, like what the critique of the orphan, archives as well that I talked about. And this is, I think, I mean, for me, I'm currently again, stopped going to the second-hand market, which is called Souk al-Antiquat or Antiques Souk Market or Souk Diana in Cairo. It happens every Saturday. I mean, I stopped going there because I really get annoyed when I go there because you feel, it's like people going to a supermarket before a family starts. Seriously, and just collecting, and many people are collecting random things, people collecting photos. Things are really thrown out anyway, and that's why I started to have, some of the sellers to meet them, invite them in Shubra, invite them to the events in Shubra. One of them actually is from Shubra, so we meet on a coffee house there when I go back to have a calm conversations with them because, of course, during the day they are not, they are very busy. But why also I'm annoyed because you never know how these things what will happen with these things, right? I would love to, I don't want really to get what they have, but I want to follow them, what will you do with them? Some people really put them on eBay, some people sell them abroad, some people, and then some people really, I found some of these pictures like in other neighboring countries as well, being taken from the market. So I feel like, okay, I don't mind anyone to take anything and to exhibit it or to put it on, but there should be something that, okay, if a picture that was taken at a studio in Shubra, I mean, then I'm insisting on the category of Shubra because this is what I can work on, and then we can relate it to other categories, like. Let's see, okay, this picture, let's see this studio, let's see if the photographer is still there, let's see if the person is still living there who is in the picture. Because, like once, for example, and this is maybe, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but once there is someone who found his a contract of his apartment at online, being sold online. And then he had to buy it in order to prove that the house belongs to him, and it was a court case. And so I think there is a kind of, as I said, fragmented, scattered, random, scene happening, because again, there is a state archives which are, tabooish in a way. So this, which led really to this fragmentation. But I would always, in my opinion, as a speculation, maybe I hope I'm wrong, at some point the state would enter the scene and will crack down. They will crack down because these people, these markets, the sellers, they have to pay kind of, let's say, bribes, to the police men every week in order to stay. Of course, official bribes, let's say. So at some point, the state would intervene and would stop this, and would really get into the houses because the people keep the piles of archives at their homes. Some of them rent other houses. They would just enter and they would stop this commercialization of it, because if there is money, the state should have a share, right? Yeah, so this kind of thing might happen soon, and that's why I'm trying really with the sellers, because I think they are key actors, to tell them, okay, let's have a more sustainable, solution for you to have money. Maybe we can make a digital platform. This digital platform, we can put on them the documents, and then why not doing like what the British Library is doing, If you want a copy, you order a copy, we send it to you DHL, and you pay money. He has a share. People in Shubra or this digital platform will have a share. Or if they want the original copy, they come to Egypt, and we give them, like, they can look into the original copy, and they also have access to it through money as well. And this is maybe you can then generate money. I'm also start to think business with them, because this is really how you can communicate, right? And we can just build really a couple of them accepted, but then this is my last slide, vulnerable partnerships, because they accepted, they told me, we will wait for you. Every 2 weeks I call them, don't sell anything. I'm coming back. But I don't guarantee anything, of course. If anything would happen, right? If the grant that I'm applying for didn't arrive, if one of them is his daughter is getting married next year, he will need money, he will sell anything. So this is exactly the vernacular, how really buying, how this archival scene is being determined by people's everyday lives, and how people's everyday lives contribute to the archival scene and to the archival practice. So it's kind of, if you want, it's a way to move archivists beyond being an elitist practice, through their people's it's a kind of their own things. So they want to, so it's a part also of the vernacularization of it, to make it part of their local lives. Sorry, I'm just still.
No, this is
a lot of stories, but yeah.
Yasmin spoke.
Yeah, Yasmin spoke finally. I want her to help me, but
do you want to read it outline?
Yeah, okay.
Out loud for the.
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin. I would like to add to what Mina said. Mina has already shared, answering Mariam's question, that family collection archiving is already embedded in our culture, in our homes, nuclear families, and even in groups of friends. However, it's even unspoken or even considered. Now, when buy a whole collection of a family that include the most personal and private details of their life over many years, this considered a sign of the excitedness of also vernacular archiving. I would also like to refer to the work of one of our researchers, Nasreen, who tried to trace how mothers used to recycle biscuits, meat, metal boxes, which I think very like global, I guess. And you get surprised when you find biscuits in the boxes, right? Very special kind in Egypt, and to archive private items. Yeah. So also that is part of our current project called Family House, archiving home as in changing times, or home as archives of changing times. And that's the current project that we hope to end by the end of the year. Thanks, Yasmin.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Yasmin. Thanks to anyone who attended online and on-site. This was really insightful, and I think we're gonna leave it here, although I'm sure you're gonna get tons of emails of follow-up questions.
We'll be so happy.
And I hope we get another chance for us to talk about this. Thank you. Thank you.